The crowd had already gathered long before sunrise. Men, women, even children, stood shoulder to shoulder in the cold streets, whispering, waiting. They weren't here for justice. They were here for a spectacle. At the center of the square stood a wooden platform, darkened by years of use. And beside it, a man in plain clothes. No crown, no armor, no symbol of power. But everyone knew his name. Franz Schmidt. The executioner. He wasn't a monster in appearance. In fact, he looked ordinary. Calm. Composed. Precise. But his hands had ended more lives than most soldiers ever would. Not in battle. Not in anger. But in silence. With method. With ritual. Franz Schmidt was born into a life he never chose. His father had been forced into the role of executioner, against his will. And in the rigid society of the 16th century, professions were inherited. That meant Franz had no escape. No matter what kind of man he wanted to become. His path had already been decided. In the Holy Roman Empire, executioners lived on the edge of society. They were needed, but never respected. Feared, but never accepted. People avoided them, wouldn't touch them, wouldn't share meals with them. To others, they were tainted, marked by death itself. But Franz was different. He kept records, detailed records. Every execution, every punishment, every name. He didn't see himself as a butcher. He saw himself as something else. A servant of justice. Over the course of his life, Franz Schmidt carried out hundreds of executions, beheadings, hangings, and punishments that most people today could never imagine. But what made him different was not just what he did. It was how he did it. Execution, in his eyes, was not meant to be chaotic. It was meant to be precise, clean, almost merciful. A skilled executioner could end a life in a single moment. A poor one could turn it into suffering. And Franz took pride in being the former. When the day came for an execution, everything followed a ritual. The prisoner was brought forward, often weak, sometimes defiant, sometimes already broken. The crowd would surge closer. Whispers would turn into murmurs. And all eyes would turn, not to the condemned, but to the executioner. Franz would step forward, calm, focused, detached. This was his craft. For beheadings, he preferred the sword, not the axe. The sword required more skill, more control. One clean strike, and it was over. Or at least, it was supposed to be. Because when it wasn't, the consequences were horrifying. A single mistake could mean multiple strikes, pain, panic, a crowd turning restless, and an executioner's reputation destroyed. Franz understood this better than anyone, so he practiced relentlessly. He trained his body, his focus, his precision. Because in his world, a steady hand meant everything. But not every punishment was swift. Some were designed to send a message. Criminals could be flogged in public, their backs torn open, as crowds watched. Others were branded, marked permanently, so their crimes would never be forgotten. And then, there were the punishments meant to break a person. Slowly, wheel executions, where the body was shattered, piece by piece. Public displays meant to instill fear. Franz carried out these orders. But according to his own writings, he did not enjoy them. In fact, he often tried to reduce suffering, to make executions quicker, to maintain dignity, even in death. It's a strange contradiction. A man who ended lives, yet tried to do it humanely. But no matter how carefully he worked, the weight of what he did could never be escaped. Each execution was recorded. Each life noted. Men, women, sometimes even the young. And as the numbers grew, so did his reputation. People began to fear his name, not because he was cruel, but because he was inevitable. If Franz Schmidt was called, there was no turning back. Yet outside the execution square, he lived a different life. He treated the sick, helped the injured, used knowledge of the human body, not just to end life, but to save it. To some, he was a healer. To others, a symbol of death. And that duality followed him everywhere. Even in his own home, he could never truly escape his identity. Society would not let him. No matter how skilled, how careful, how disciplined he was still an executioner. And in that world, that was something you could never wash away. But Franz had one final goal. He wanted freedom. Not physical freedom, but social freedom. He wanted his family name restored. His children to live without stigma. So he did something unusual. He petitioned for redemption. Using his detailed records, his years of service, he appealed to authority, arguing that he had served justice faithfully, honorably. And in the end, he succeeded. Late in his life, Franz Schmidt was officially freed from the stigma of his profession. A rare honor, one almost no executioner ever received. After a lifetime of death, he was finally allowed to live as an ordinary man. But the question remains, can a man who has taken hundreds of lives ever truly leave that behind? Or does it stay with him forever? Because history remembers Franz Schmidt in two ways. As a man of precision, a man of discipline, and as one of the most prolific executioners to ever live. A man whose hands delivered justice, or something far darker, and perhaps the most unsettling truth of all. He believed he was doing the right thing,